The air hummed with the low thrum of Nebula's vibrant energy. Liam O'Connell adjusted his visor, the nebula's kaleidoscopic light painting his face in shifting hues of emerald and violet. He knelt beside a cluster of Lumina flora, their petals unfurling in a slow, mesmerizing dance, mirroring the nebula's celestial ballet. He reached out a gloved hand, a sensor probe extending from his wrist, gently brushing against a luminous petal. The data streamed onto his visor, energy fluctuations, unlike anything he'd encountered. Nebula was a symphony of interconnected life, a fragile ecosystem unlike anything on Earth, and Liam, a xenobotanist driven by an insatiable curiosity, was determined to understand its every note. Fascinating, he murmured, the word barely audible above the soft hum of his equipment. He hadn't expected to find a new Lumina variant so close to the research outpost. A ripple of light, a flicker of movement at the edge of his vision, drew his attention. A figure, shimmering with the nebula's colors, stood a few meters away. Her skin glowed with an inner luminescence, her hair flowing like liquid starlight, woven through with delicate, bioluminescent patterns that shifted and pulsed. A Xylari. Liam had seen Xylari from a distance, fleeting glimpses of vibrant life amidst the alien foliage. But up close, the reality of their existence, their connection to this extraordinary world, was breathtaking. He straightened, unsure of the protocol, a nervous tremor in his hand. I didn't mean to intrude, he stammered, his voice echoing awkwardly in the stillness. The Xylari tilted her head, the luminescent patterns on her skin swirling like miniature nebulae. Her eyes, large and luminous, met his with an unsettling intensity. "This place calls to you," she said, her voice like the chime of wind chimes. "As it calls to me. I am Xyla." "Liam O'Connell," he replied, feeling a strange pull towards her, a mixture of scientific fascination and something deeper, something he couldn't quite name. He found himself captivated by the way the nebula's light played across her features, by the gentle ebb and flow of the luminescent patterns on her skin. "The Lumina sings a different song," Xyla observed, her gaze returning to the plants. "A disharmony." Liam glanced at his readings. The energy fluctuations were growing more erratic. "I've noticed the changes in the nebula's energy patterns. It's affecting the flora, and the fauna too." He hesitated. Do you know why?" Xyla's luminous eyes darkened. "The sky whispers of a hunger we haven't known before." A tremor ran through her, a ripple of fear reflected in the shifting light of her skin. A chill ran down Liam's spine. He had seen anomalies in the long-range scans, dismissed them as sensor glitches. Now, looking at Xyla's face, he knew he had been wrong. Something was coming. Days turned into weeks as Liam and Xyla worked together, studying the escalating changes in Nebula's ecosystem. The strange energy fluctuations were growing stronger, the nebula's colors intensifying, painting the sky in ever more vibrant, unsettling hues. The Lumina plants, once a source of fascination, now seemed to writhe in silent agony. Animals were growing sick, their bioluminescence flickering and fading. Liam's heart ached for this world, for the delicate balance he was witnessing unravel. He felt a responsibility to protect it, a responsibility that conflicted with his duty to humanity, his yearning to return to a life he had left behind, a life that now seemed distant and unreal. He thought of the family he had lost on Earth, a pang of grief echoing through him. Here, on Nebula, amidst the vibrant chaos, he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years. And Xyla, she was a part of that. Their shared purpose had drawn them closer. Late one night, while analyzing data in the research lab, Liam felt Xyla's hand on his arm. Her touch sent a shiver through him, a strange mix of warmth and a tingling sensation. He looked at her, at the worry etched on her luminous face. The patterns on her skin pulsed with a rapid, erratic rhythm. "The KRYLL," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They are here." The nebula blazed with an unnatural intensity, its color swirling and shifting like a disturbed kaleidoscope. The familiar emerald and violet hues were now laced with streaks of crimson and gold, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. The Lumina plants pulsed erratically, their delicate dance replaced by a frantic, convulsive twitching. Even the air felt charged, crackling with an unseen energy. Xyla stood beside Liam, her luminescent patterns flaring and dimming in rapid succession, reflecting her inner turmoil. "The sky bleeds," she whispered, her voice laced with a sorrow Liam felt resonating within his own chest. "Nebula weeps." "The energy readings are off the charts," Liam confirmed, his voice tight with a growing unease. He pointed to a cluster of wilting, grey-tinged vegetation. "The flora is reacting violently." "And the fauna," he trailed off, unable to articulate the growing sense of dread. A sickly, fluttering moth fell from the sky, its bioluminescence extinguished, leaving only a dull grey husk. Xyla knelt beside the dead moth, her fingers gently tracing its lifeless form. The luminescent patterns on her skin dimmed, a palpable expression of grief. "The KRYLL drain the life from Nebula," she explained, her voice thick with emotion. "They consume the light, leaving only shadows." Liam felt a surge of protective anger. This beautiful world, this unique ecosystem, was being devoured. And Xyla, so intrinsically linked to Nebula's life force, was suffering with it. He touched her shoulder, his gloved hand hovering hesitantly for a moment before making contact. He half expected her to recoil, but she didn't. Instead, she turned to him, her luminous eyes meeting his, a silent plea in their depths. That touch, though separated by the fabric of his glove, sparked a strange warmth that spread through him. He knew he should focus on the scientific data, on finding a solution, but he couldn't tear his gaze away from Xyla. The human outpost was in disarray. The unsettling changes in Nebula's energy patterns were affecting their systems, creating malfunctions and communication blackouts. Liam knew they had to contact Earth, warn them of the potential danger, but a part of him, a selfish, traitorous part, didn't want to. He didn't want to leave Nebula, leave Xyla. "There might be a way," Xyla said, interrupting his thoughts. "A way to disrupt the KRYLL's connection to Nebula's energy." Her voice, though strained, held a note of determination. "But it is a dangerous path. One that requires trust." "You have my trust," Liam said without hesitation. He knew it was reckless, possibly even foolish, but in that moment, he couldn't imagine choosing any other path. Xyla's luminescent patterns pulsed with a renewed intensity. "Then come," she said, extending her hand. This time, there was no glove between them. Her skin felt surprisingly warm, pulsing with the same vibrant energy that flowed through Nebula. Liam felt a jolt, a current of energy passing between them, and for a fleeting moment, he saw a glimpse of her world, her connection to Nebula, a vast network of light and life. They journeyed deep into the pulsating heart of a crystalline cavern, a place where the Nebula's light was concentrated, amplified, a source of power for the entire planet. Xyla moved with an effortless grace, navigating the treacherous terrain as if she were a part of it, guided by an instinct Liam couldn't comprehend. As they ventured deeper, Liam felt a growing unease. His scientific mind screamed at him, warning him of the potential dangers. This place, the heart of Nebula, was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It felt alive. A low growl echoed through the cavern, a sound that vibrated deep within Liam's bones. Xyla stiffened, her hand tightening on his. "KRYLL," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the echoing growl. Before Liam could react, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its form shimmering and distorted, a grotesque parody of Nebula's vibrant beauty. It lunged towards Xyla, its shadowy claws extended. Without hesitation, Liam stepped in front of Xyla, shielding her with his body. He knew it was futile, a human body against a creature born of nebulaic energy, but he couldn't let her be harmed. A blinding flash of light erupted from Xyla, a wave of pure energy that sent the KRYLL reeling back into the shadows. Liam stumbled, momentarily blinded by the intensity of the light. When his vision cleared, Xyla was standing before him, her luminescent patterns blazing with a fierce, protective glow. "Nebula protects her own," she whispered, her voice filled with a power Liam had never heard before. Later, back at the research outpost, Liam sat staring at the data streaming across his visor. He had contacted Earth, warned them of the KRYLL, of the impending danger. They had offered him a place on the next transport, a chance to return home. But home wasn't Earth anymore. Home was here, with Xyla, on Nebula. He found her outside, standing at the edge of the forest, her silhouette outlined against the swirling nebula. He walked towards her, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm not leaving," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Xyla turned to him, her luminous eyes searching his. "You choose to stay?" "I choose Nebula," he replied, taking her hand in his. "I choose you." The KRYLL weren't just draining Nebula's energy, they were consuming its very essence. Liam watched, horrified, as a vibrant patch of Lumina flora withered and turned grey under the KRYLL's touch. The creatures themselves were shadowy, amorphous, their forms shifting and swirling like dark nebulaic smoke. They pulsed with a stolen energy, a grotesque parody of Nebula's vibrant beauty. "They feed on the light," Xyla said, her voice filled with despair. "They are a blight upon Nebula's heart." The bioluminescent patterns on her skin dimmed, mirroring the dying flora around them. Liam felt a pang of sympathy, a protectiveness that surprised him. He reached out, his gloved hand hesitantly touching her arm. This time, the touch wasn't hesitant. He didn't care about protocol or interspecies etiquette. He just wanted to comfort her. Her skin felt warm, radiating a faint heat even through the protective layers of his suit. He could feel the subtle pulsing of her bioluminescence, a rhythmic beat that echoed the heartbeat of Nebula itself. For a moment, he saw it, a fleeting vision of a network of light connecting Xyla to the planet, to the Lumina flora, to every living thing on Nebula. The KRYLL were disrupting that connection, severing the threads of this intricate web of life. "There has to be a way to stop them," Liam said, more to himself than to Xyla. He knew the odds were stacked against them. The KRYLL were unlike anything he had encountered, a force of nature driven by an insatiable hunger. But he couldn't give up, not now. Not when he saw the pain in Xyla's eyes, not when he felt the dying pulse of Nebula beneath his feet. "My people believe the KRYLL can be reasoned with," Xyla said, her voice laced with doubt. "But I am not so sure." Liam knew what she was thinking. He had seen the KRYLL's destructive power, their single-minded focus on consumption. Negotiation seemed like a fool's errand. But he also saw the flicker of hope in Xyla's eyes, the desperate need to believe in a peaceful solution. "We can try," he said, offering her a reassuring smile. He knew it was a long shot, but he was willing to try anything if it meant giving Xyla a glimmer of hope. Xyla met his gaze, her luminous eyes searching his. For a moment, their world narrowed to this shared space, this fragile bubble of hope amidst the growing darkness. Then, she did something unexpected. She reached out, her bare hand touching his cheek. The contact sent a jolt through him, a wave of warmth that spread from his cheek down to his toes. "If anyone can bridge the divide," she whispered, "it is you, Liam O'Connell." Xyla's faith in him, her belief in the possibility of cooperation, was a burden and a gift. It fueled his determination, but it also terrified him. What if he failed? What if he couldn't live up to her expectations? He had lost his family on Earth, a tragedy that had left him adrift, searching for a purpose. Here, on Nebula, with Xyla, he had found something worth fighting for. He couldn't lose her. He couldn't lose this world. The Xylari elders were skeptical, their faces etched with worry. They gathered in a circle of shimmering light, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing with a mixture of fear and hope. Xyla stood beside Liam, her hand resting on his arm, a silent gesture of solidarity. He knew she was risking everything by advocating for cooperation with humans. The elders saw humans as outsiders, a potential threat to their delicate balance with Nebula. Liam explained his plan, using simple terms, avoiding technical jargon. He spoke of the KRYLL's vulnerability to certain frequencies, of the possibility of disrupting their energy absorption without harming Nebula's ecosystem. He emphasized the shared threat, the need for cooperation if they were to survive. As he spoke, a low tremor shook the ground. The nebula's colors intensified, pulsing with an erratic energy. A cry went up from the Xylari elders. The KRYLL were attacking. "They do not understand our ways," one of the elders cried, his voice filled with fear. "They see only weakness. Zyla's grip tightened on Liam's arm. "No," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "They are driven by hunger, not malice. We can show them another way." Before Liam could respond, a shadowy figure burst into the clearing, its form flickering and distorted. It lunged towards one of the elders, its shadowy claws extended. Without hesitation, Zyla stepped forward, intercepting the KRYLL's attack. A blinding flash of light erupted from her, a wave of pure energy that sent the KRYLL reeling back into the forest. Liam stared in disbelief. Zyla had risked her life to protect the elders, to prove her faith in him, in humanity. He knew then that he couldn't leave. He had to stay, not just for Nebula, but for Zyla. He had found a new home, a new purpose, and a love he never expected. The air in the lab crackled with nervous energy. Zyla watched, fascinated, as Liam's fingers danced across the console, manipulating holographic projections of Nebula's ecosystem. He'd explained the adaptable nature of human biotech, its relative youth a surprising advantage in this crisis. Unlike the highly specialized bioengineering of older galactic races, human technology could be quickly modified, repurposed, a strength born of necessity in their relatively short span among the stars. "We can tailor a response," Liam was saying, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Manipulate the Lumina flora, amplify a frequency that disrupts the KRYLL's energy absorption." But to interfere with Nebula's song, Zyla hesitated, the bioluminescent patterns on her skin flickering with anxiety. It is a delicate balance. She felt a pang of guilt. The elders would never approve of such drastic measures. Yet, watching Liam, his passion for this world so evident in his every move, she couldn't deny the possibility of his plan. He hadn't come to conquer or exploit. He had come to learn, to understand, and now, to protect. "It's a calculated risk," Liam admitted, his gaze meeting hers. "But a necessary one." He paused, as if sensing her internal struggle. He reached out, his hand hovering just above hers, hesitating. "I know this is difficult for you, Zyla. But I believe we can do this, together." The warmth of his hand, even through his glove, sent a shiver through her. She placed her hand in his, the contact sending a jolt of energy between them. His skin was smooth, warm, so different from her own shimmering surface. The touch both thrilled and unsettled her. What would her people think, seeing her like this, hand in hand with a human? Their plan took shape, a fusion of human ingenuity and Zylari understanding. They would use modified spores, dispersed throughout the ecosystem, to amplify a naturally occurring frequency within the Lumina flora, a frequency harmless to Nebula's life but disruptive to the KRYLL's ability to absorb energy. Working side by side, the days melted into nights. Liam's touch, initially hesitant, became more familiar, comforting. He would brush a stray strand of her luminescent hair from her face, his fingers lingering for a moment, sending a warmth spreading through her. He spoke of Earth, of the family he had lost, the grief that still lingered in his eyes. He confessed his conflicted feelings, torn between his duty to his people and his growing attachment to Nebula, to her. "I should go back," he said one night, his voice low, filled with a quiet sadness. "They need me." "But Nebula needs you too," Zyla replied, her voice barely a whisper. She knew she was crossing a line, interfering in a decision that should be his alone. But she couldn't bear the thought of him leaving. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a depth of emotion that made her heart ache. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, reverent. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He leaned in, his lips brushing against hers, a fleeting kiss that sent a shockwave through her. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced, a sensation both alien and familiar, a spark that ignited a fire within her. News of their plan spread through the outpost and amongst the Zylari, sparking fear and suspicion. Some of the human scientists questioned Liam's loyalty, his objectivity. The Zylari elders, clinging to their ancient traditions, saw his methods as a violation of Nebula's sacred harmony. Zyla knew she had to prove her faith in Liam, her belief in the possibility of a symbiotic solution. She volunteered to present their plan to the KRYLL, a dangerous undertaking that could cost her life. The KRYLL, driven by their primal hunger, might see her as an enemy, an obstacle to their consumption. The KRYLL's presence was overwhelming, a swirling mass of shadowy energy that pulsed with a stolen light. Xyla stood before them, her bioluminescent patterns blazing with a defiant glow. She spoke of Nebula's pain, of the interconnectedness of all life, of the possibility of a shared existence. As she spoke, the ground began to tremble. The nebula's colors intensified, pulsing with an erratic energy. A cry went up from the human outpost. An attack! The KRYLL, misinterpreting the humans' defensive preparations as a hostile act, launched an assault on the outpost. Xyla knew she had to warn Liam, but the KRYLL were between her and the outpost. Without hesitation, she plunged into the swirling mass of shadowy energy, using her connection to Nebula's energy field to disrupt the KRYLL's attack, buying precious time for Liam and the others to prepare their defenses. Liam watched in horror as Xyla disappeared into the swirling mass of KRYLL. He had to choose. Stay and defend the outpost, or risk everything to save her? He didn't hesitate. He activated his emergency beacon, signaling the outpost to initiate the spore dispersal, and then he plunged into the heart of the KRYLL's attack, following the faint glow of Xyla's bioluminescence. He found her surrounded by KRYLL, her energy fading, her light dimming. He fought his way to her side, his own energy reserves dwindling. He knew they might not make it out alive. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why risk your life for me?" "Because I believe in you, Liam," she whispered back, her voice weak but resolute. "I believe in us." He took her hand, the contact sending a surge of energy between them. He closed his eyes, focusing all his remaining energy on their connection, on the shared hope that had brought them together. The modified spores, released into the atmosphere, transformed Nebula into a breathtaking spectacle of light and color. The Lumina flora pulsed with a new frequency, a vibrant symphony that resonated throughout the ecosystem. The KRYLL, their energy absorption disrupted, retreated, their shadowy forms fading into the nebula's vibrant embrace. The KRYLL threat had been neutralized, but the victory was bittersweet. Nebula had been changed, its delicate balance forever altered. And Liam and Xyla, their bond forged in the crucible of crisis, faced an uncertain future. Their love, a beacon of hope in a galaxy teeming with conflict, was a testament to the interconnectedness of all life, but also a challenge to the established order, a defiance of the boundaries that separated their worlds. They stood hand in hand, two souls from different stars, bound together by a love that defied definition, a love that whispered of a new dawn for Nebula, and for them. The air within the heart of the nebula shimmered, a kaleidoscope of light pulsing from the crystalline walls of the cavern. Liam adjusted his visor, the vibrant display almost overwhelming his senses. This place, Xyla had explained, was the source of Nebula's energy, the nexus of its life force. He could feel it thrumming beneath his feet, resonating through his body, a symphony of light and energy unlike anything he'd encountered on Earth. "It is breathtaking," he murmured, his voice echoing strangely in the vast cavern. Xyla smiled, the bioluminescent patterns on her skin swirling like miniature nebulae. "Nebula's heart beats strong," she replied, her voice like the chime of wind chimes. "It is a gift, and a responsibility." Liam understood. He had dedicated his life to studying interconnected ecosystems, the delicate balance of life. But Nebula was on a scale beyond anything he'd imagined, a testament to the infinite possibilities of life in the universe. He glanced at Xyla, the nebula's light painting her features in shifting hues of emerald and violet. He had tried to maintain a professional distance, to focus on the mission, but her presence was a constant distraction, a magnetic pull he couldn't resist. They collected data, their movement synchronized, a silent dance in the heart of the nebula. Liam's gloved hand brushed against Xyla's as they reached for the same crystalline formation. He felt a jolt, a tingling sensation that spread through his arm. He pulled back quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm sorry," he stammered, unsure if his touch had harmed her. Xyla tilted her head, her luminous eyes searching his. "Your touch, it is different," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But not unpleasant." Liam hesitated, then reached out again, his gloved hand gently touching her arm. This time, he didn't pull away. He could feel the warmth of her skin through the protective layers of his suit, the subtle pulsing of her bioluminescence. It felt right. They continued their work, the silence broken only by the hum of their equipment and the soft whisper of the nebula's energy. But the air between them had changed, charged with an unspoken tension, a growing awareness of each other that transcended the scientific mission that had brought them together. He thought of Earth, of the emptiness he had felt since losing his family in the solar flares. Here, on Nebula, with Xyla, he felt a flicker of hope, a sense of belonging he hadn't realized he'd been missing. A tremor shook the cavern, the nebula's colors intensifying, pulsing with an erratic energy. Xyla stiffened, her hand tightening on his arm. "They are coming," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "The KRYLL." Liam's heart sank. He knew what this meant. Xyla had to warn her people, and he had to warn the outpost. But the KRYLL were between them and safety. "Go," he said, his voice firm. "I'll create a diversion." Xyla hesitated, her luminous eyes searching his. "No," she said, her voice resolute. "I will go. You must warn your people. They will listen to you." Before Liam could argue, she was gone, disappearing into the swirling nebulaic light, a flicker of hope against the encroaching darkness. He watched her go, his heart aching with a mixture of fear and admiration. She was risking her life, not just for her people, but for him, for humanity. It was a gesture of trust, a bridge between their worlds, a testament to the bond that had formed between them. He activated his emergency beacon, a desperate plea for help, and then he turned to face the KRYLL, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. He had made his choice. He was staying, not just for Nebula, but for Xyla. Earth was a distant memory, a life he had left behind. His home was here, now, in this vibrant, chaotic world, with the woman who had shown him the true meaning of connection. He wouldn't leave her. He couldn't. He would face the KRYLL, and whatever the future held, he would face it with her. He just hoped she made it back. The luminescent algae solutions glowed in their vials, a spectrum of Nebula's vibrant hues captured in liquid form. Liam meticulously calibrated the frequency emitter, the device that would transmit the modified bioluminescent signal through the planet's flora. He knew the risks. Interfering with Nebula's delicate ecosystem was a gamble, but the KRYLL's relentless consumption left them no other choice. Xyla stood beside him, her usual radiant glow dimmed, replaced by a nervous shimmer. "It is a violation," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the hum of the equipment. "But a necessary one." He glanced at her, seeing the conflict mirrored in his own heart. His duty was to observe, to study, not to interfere. But watching the KRYLL drain the life from this world, seeing the pain in Xyla's eyes, had changed something within him. He couldn't stand idly by while Nebula withered and died. He had lost his family on Earth, a void he had carried with him like a phantom limb. Here, on Nebula, he had found something worth fighting for, a world teeming with life, a purpose, and a connection with Xyla that defied logic and protocol. He reached out, his gloved hand hesitantly touching her arm. He'd wondered if their different physiologies would make physical contact dangerous, but the touch felt right. Warm, comforting, a subtle pulse of energy beneath his fingertips. "It will work," he said, his voice firm, trying to convince himself as much as her. Xyla met his gaze, her luminous eyes searching his. "I trust you, Liam," she whispered, her words a balm to his soul. He saw a glimmer of her own struggle, the guilt she felt for defying her elders, for placing her faith in a human. He wanted to tell her how much her trust meant to him, how much her presence had come to mean to him, but the words caught in his throat. Their cultures, their ways of expressing emotion, were so different. He had to learn her language, not just the spoken words, but the subtle shifts in her bioluminescence, the silent language of her heart. He had to earn her trust, not just as a scientist, but as a... He couldn't even name it yet. News of their plan spread through the outpost, sparking debate and dissent. Some of his colleagues questioned his methods, his judgment, even his loyalty to humanity. The prospect of returning to Earth, once a distant dream, now felt like a betrayal. He had made his choice. His home was here, with Xyla, on Nebula. Xyla, in a daring move to prove her faith in him and their shared plan, volunteered to present their proposal to the KRYLL. He'd argued against it, fearing for her safety, but her resolve was unwavering. "They must understand," she'd said, her voice ringing with conviction. "They must see that we offer not conquest, but coexistence." He watched her approach the swirling mass of KRYLL, a shimmering former beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. His heart ached with fear and admiration. She was risking everything, not just for her people, but for him, for humanity. Then, the alarms blared. The KRYLL, misinterpreting the outpost's defensive preparations as a hostile act, launched a full-scale assault. Chaos erupted. The ground shook, the nebula's colors pulsed with violent energy. The KRYLL surged towards the outpost, a swirling tide of shadowy figures. Xyla was trapped, caught between the outpost and the advancing KRYLL. He had to make a choice. Stay and defend the outpost, or risk everything to save her? His heart screamed her name. He activated the spore dispersal sequence, a desperate gamble to repel the KRYLL, and then he plunged into the heart of the attack, his only guide the faint glow of Xyla's bioluminescence. He found her surrounded, her energy fading, her light dimming. He fought his way to her side, his own energy reserves dwindling. He knew they might not survive. "Why, Xyla," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. "Why risk your life?" Her hand found his, the touch sending a surge of warmth through his body. "Because I believe in us, Liam," she whispered back, her voice weak but resolute. "In our future." The spores took effect, transforming Nebula into a dazzling display of light and color. The KRYLL, their energy absorption disrupted, retreated. They had won, but at a cost. Nebula was changed, its delicate balance altered forever. And their relationship, forged in the crucible of crisis, faced an uncertain future, condemned by both their peoples. He stood with Xyla, hand in hand, amidst the ruins of the outpost, their love a fragile beacon of hope in a galaxy torn by conflict. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he would face it with her, together. Their love, a whisper in the nebula's heart, was a testament to the interconnectedness of all life, a promise of a new beginning, a dream yet to be realized. The glimmering tide of modified Lumina spores swept across Nebula, painting the landscape in pulsating waves of emerald, sapphire, and amethyst. Liam watched from the outpost's observation deck, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Below, the KRYLL writhed, their shadowy forms contorting as the altered bioluminescence disrupted their energy absorption. It was working. Their desperate gamble was paying off. But the victory was short-lived. The KRYLL, starved and desperate, launched a counter-offensive, their shadowy figures swarming towards the outpost like a rising tide of darkness. The outpost's defenses blazed to life, energy beams lancing out to meet the KRYLL's assault. The air crackled with the energy discharge, the ground vibrating beneath Liam's feet. The nebula's colors intensified, mirroring the escalating chaos. Xyla's voice crackled in his comm, urgent and strained. "They are overwhelming our defenses. We must retreat." Liam's gaze swept across the monitors, his mind racing. The Xylari were falling back, their shimmering forms flickering and fading as the KRYLL drained their energy. He saw Xyla, her light dimming, surrounded by a swirling mass of shadowy figures. He had to choose. Stay and defend the outpost, follow protocol, or risk everything to save her? His duty was to humanity, to the mission. But his heart belonged to Nebula, to Xyla. He slammed his fist on the console, overriding the evacuation protocol, diverting power to the transport bay. "Prepare for immediate launch," he barked into the comm. "I'm going after Xyla." He plunged into the heart of the KRYLL's attack, his personal shield flickering under the relentless assault. The air was thick with the KRYLL's energy, a suffocating darkness that threatened to consume him. He found Xyla, her luminescent patterns dimmed, her movements sluggish. A KRYLL lunged, its shadowy claws raking across her arm, leaving a trail of fading light. Liam fired his energy weapon, disintegrating the KRYLL. He reached for Xyla, his hand trembling as it brushed against her arm. He'd never touched her bare skin before, had always been hesitant, uncertain of the consequences. But now, with her life fading, all his doubts vanished. Her skin felt surprisingly warm, radiating a faint heat, a fragile pulse of life beneath his fingertips. "Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the roar of the battle. "You shouldn't be here." "I'm not leaving you," he said, his voice firm, his grip tightening on her arm. He pulled her towards the transport, shielding her with his body as they fought their way through the swirling mass of KRYLL. They reached the transport bay, the doors slamming shut behind them just as the KRYLL breached the perimeter defenses. Liam collapsed onto the floor, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked at Xyla, her luminescent patterns flickering weakly, the wound on her arm a dark stain against her shimmering skin. He tore a strip of fabric from his suit, wrapping it around her wound. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the chaos of the battle faded away, replaced by a shared sense of relief, a silent understanding that transcended words. They escaped the outpost just as it fell, the structure collapsing into a cloud of dust and debris. They watched from the transport as the KRYLL swarmed over the wreckage, their shadowy forms silhouetted against the vibrant backdrop of the nebula. The Earth authorities reprimanded him, questioned his judgment, his loyalty. The Xylari elders condemned her actions, her trust in a human. They both lost their place, their purpose, their home. But they had each other. They found a quiet refuge in a remote corner of Nebula, a place untouched by the KRYLL's devastation. They worked together, healing the wounded planet, rebuilding their lives, their love a fragile seedling in the ravaged landscape. Their relationship was a challenge, a constant negotiation of different cultures, different understandings of love and intimacy. He had to learn her silent language, the subtle shifts in her bioluminescence that conveyed her emotions. She had to learn his words, his clumsy attempts to express feelings he had buried deep within himself since the loss of his family. Their love was a whisper in the nebula's heart, a testament to the interconnectedness of all life, a fragile hope for a future where humans and Xylari could coexist, not as conquerors and subjects, but as equals, united by a shared love for this vibrant, chaotic world. Whether they could bridge the divide between their cultures, whether their love could survive the condemnation of their peoples, remained an open question, a whisper in the vast expanse of the nebula. But for now, in this quiet refuge, amidst the echoes of loss and the promise of a new beginning, their love was enough. The KRYLL assault was a maelstrom of shadow and fury. The outpost's defenses held, but barely. Liam fought alongside the human security team, his energy weapon spitting bolts of blinding light, momentarily repelling the shadowy figures that swarmed the perimeter. The nebula's colors pulsed frantically, reflecting the chaotic energy of the battle. Amidst the chaos, Liam's thoughts were with Xyla. He'd seen her fall, a KRYLL's shadowy claw raking across her arm, leaving a trail of fading bioluminescence. He had to reach her. He broke away from the main defensive line, his shield flickering precariously under the KRYLL's relentless assault. He found her slumped against a shattered console, her light dimmed, her movement sluggish. A wave of protectiveness surged through him, stronger than any fear, any sense of duty. He fired his energy weapon, disintegrating the KRYLL that lunged towards her, and knelt beside her. "Xyla!" Her luminous eyes flickered open. "Liam, go, it's too late." He touched her arm, his gloved hand brushing against her bare skin. He felt a jolt, a strange mix of warmth and a tingling sensation. Her skin felt smooth, almost silken, pulsing with a faint heat, a fragile spark of life. He ignored the warning alarms from his suit, the potential bioincompatibility flashing across his visor. He tore a strip of fabric from his own suit, wrapping it around her wound. "I'm not leaving you," he said, his voice hoarse, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He pulled her to her feet, supporting her weight as they stumbled towards the nearest emergency transport. They made it just as the outpost's defenses finally crumbled. Liam punched in the launch sequence, his hand shaking, his mind racing. He watched on the monitor as the KRYLL swarmed over the outpost, their shadowy figures consuming everything in their path. He had abandoned his post, his duty, his people. But he hadn't hesitated. He couldn't. Xyla's life was more important than any mission, any protocol. They landed in a remote valley, the Nebula's light casting long, eerie shadows across the landscape. Xyla's wound was deep, the KRYLL's touch a dark stain against her shimmering skin. Liam used his medical kit, his hands gentle as he cleaned and bandaged the injury. He'd always been careful, maintaining a professional distance, respecting her alien physiology. But now, touching her bare skin, feeling the warmth of her body against his, something shifted within him. The professional detachment he'd maintained crumbled, replaced by a raw, overwhelming protectiveness, a tenderness he hadn't realized he was capable of. "Why, Liam," she whispered, her voice weak. "Why risk your life for me?" He looked at her, the Nebula's light reflecting in her luminous eyes. He saw her pain, her confusion, her fear. He saw, too, a glimmer of something else, something deeper, something that resonated with the emptiness he'd carried within himself since the loss of his family on Earth, consumed by the solar flares that had ravaged their colony. He'd dedicated his life to science, to understanding the interconnectedness of life, but he'd never felt truly connected, not until he met her. Because you showed me what it means to be alive," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Because you showed me that connection, it's not just about data, about science. It's about this." He hesitated, searching for the right word, the right way to express the emotion swirling within him. "It's about us." Xyla tilted her head, her luminous eyes searching his. She reached out, her hand hesitantly touching his cheek. The touch sent a shiver down his spine, a wave of warmth that spread through his body. "We are different, Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Our ways, our understandings, they are not the same." He nodded, understanding. He knew their cultures, their ways of expressing affection, were worlds apart. He had so much to learn, not just about her physiology, but about her heart, her soul. "I know," he said, his voice soft. "But I want to learn. I want to understand you." Their relationship was a fragile bloom in a ravaged landscape, a testament to the possibility of connection amidst chaos. The Earth authorities reprimanded him, questioned his judgment. He was offered a place on the next transport, a chance to return to a life he no longer recognized. He refused. The Xylari elders condemned her, her trust in a human, her willingness to risk her life for his. She was ostracized, her connection to her people strained. They both lost their homes, their place in their respective societies. But they found a new home, a new purpose, in each other. They worked together, tending to the wounded planet, integrating human biotech with Xylari knowledge, slowly rebuilding the ravaged ecosystem. Their love was a challenge, a constant negotiation of different cultures, different understandings of intimacy. He learned her silent language, the subtle shifts in her bioluminescence that conveyed her emotions. She learned his words, his clumsy attempts to express feelings he'd buried deep within himself. Their love was a whisper in the heart of the nebula, a beacon of hope in a galaxy teeming with conflict. Whether they could bridge the divide between their cultures, whether their love could survive the condemnation of their peoples, remained an open question, a whisper in the vast expanse of the nebula. But for now, in this quiet refuge, amidst the echoes of loss and the promise of a new beginning, their love was enough. The KRYLL threat had receded, leaving a scarred but recovering nebula in its wake. The pulsating, vibrant hues of the nebula itself seemed softer now, almost subdued, as if the planet itself was catching its breath after a fevered illness. Liam walked through the remnants of the human outpost, a desolate landscape of twisted metal and scorched earth. The air still hummed with a residual energy, a ghostly echo of the KRYLL's presence. He felt a profound sense of loss, not just for the outpost, for the lives lost, but for a future he had imagined, a future that now seemed impossible. He found Xyla by the edge of the regenerating Lumina forest, her shimmering form a beacon of light amidst the devastation. Her bioluminescent patterns were muted, reflecting the planet's exhaustion, her own near-death experience during the KRYLL's final assault. He approached her slowly, his heart pounding a familiar rhythm of anticipation and uncertainty. "It's over," he said, his voice barely a whisper, the words echoing the emptiness within him. Xyla turned to him, her luminous eyes searching his. He saw pain there, exhaustion, but also a quiet strength, a resilience that mirrored the recovering planet around them. "Nebula heals," she replied, her voice like the chime of wind chimes, soft but unwavering. "But the scars, they remain." The scars weren't just on the planet's surface. They were etched onto Xyla's soul, and onto his own. The Earth authorities had commended his bravery, his ingenuity in repelling the KRYLL, but they had also reprimanded him for his recklessness, for jeopardizing the mission, for prioritizing the life of an alien over his duty to humanity. He'd been offered a place on the next transport back to Earth, a chance to return to a life he no longer recognized, a life that now seemed empty and meaningless. He had refused. Xyla's people had condemned her for her trust in a human, for her willingness to risk her life for him, for her willingness to defy the elders and embrace his radical solution. She had been ostracized, her connection to her people strained, her place in their society uncertain. They were both outcasts now, adrift between worlds, their only solace in each other. Liam reached out, his hand hesitantly touching her arm. Her skin felt warm, smooth, pulsing with a faint energy that resonated with the life force of Nebula. The touch sent a shiver through him, a wave of warmth and longing that defied the desolation around them. "Stay," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft hum of the regenerating forest. "Help us rebuild." He nodded, his heart aching with a mixture of relief and trepidation. He knew their path wouldn't be easy. Their cultures, their understandings of love and intimacy, were worlds apart. He had lost his family on Earth, consumed by the solar flares that had ravaged their colony. He'd carried the grief with him like a phantom limb, a constant reminder of his own mortality, the fragility of life. He'd found solace in science, in the pursuit of knowledge, but it hadn't filled the void. Here, on Nebula, with Xyla, he'd found something more, a connection that transcended science, a love that defied logic and protocol. He didn't know if it could last, but he knew he had to try. They found a refuge in a remote valley, a place untouched by the KRYLL's devastation. They worked together, tending to the wounded planet, integrating human biotech with Xylari knowledge, slowly rebuilding the ravaged ecosystem. Their love was a challenge, a delicate dance of different languages, different customs, different understandings of affection. He learned her silent language, the subtle shifts in her bioluminescence that conveyed her emotions. She learned his words, his clumsy attempts to express the feelings he'd buried deep within himself. Their intimacy was slow, tentative, a gradual exploration of each other's physical and emotional landscapes. Their first kiss, beneath the swirling nebula, had been a tentative brush of lips, a spark of connection that had sent a shockwave through both of them. He had been afraid, unsure if his touch would harm her, if their different physiologies were compatible. But her response, a soft sigh, a deepening of the luminescent patterns on her skin, had reassured him. Their relationship was a whispered secret, a fragile bloom in a ravaged landscape, a testament to the possibility of connection amidst chaos. They faced condemnation from both their peoples, whispered rumors, suspicious glances. But they persevered, their love a quiet refuge in a galaxy teeming with conflict. One evening, as they sat by the edge of a newly regenerated Lumina forest, Xyla turned to him, her luminous eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Do you truly believe that our peoples can coexist?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft hum of the forest. "That humans and Xylari, that we can be allies?" Liam took her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers, the contact sending a surge of warmth through his body. He looked at her, at the shimmering beauty of her skin, the luminous depths of her eyes, and he knew that the answer was more than just a scientific hypothesis. It was a statement of faith, a declaration of love. "I believe in you, Xyla," he whispered back, his voice thick with emotion. "And I believe in us." Their love was a whisper in the nebula's heart, a beacon of hope in a galaxy torn by conflict. Whether they could bridge the divide between their cultures, whether their love could survive the condemnation of their peoples, remained an open question, a whisper in the vast expanse of the nebula. But for now, in this quiet refuge, amidst the echoes of loss and the promise of a new beginning, their love was enough. It was a start. It was everything.